When three black SUVs roll up to Miguel Ramirez's modest farmhouse on the outskirts of southern Texas, their occupants mistake his military-trained Belgian Malinois for ordinary farm dogs. Against the backdrop of vast cotton fields and the distant Mexican border, the disabled veteran sits calmly in his wheelchair on the wraparound porch, watching the cartel members emerge from their vehicles with unearned confidence. The afternoon sun glints off their gold jewelry and expensive sunglasses as they eye the seemingly vulnerable target before them. Before this day ends, they'll learn a costly lesson about underestimating a former K9 handler and his elite team of four-legged warriors. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Texas heat bears down mercilessly as Miguel adjusts his position in his wheelchair, his weathered hands moving with deliberate purpose despite his injuries. Through the screen door behind him, his three Belgian Malinois, Shadow, Delta, and Ranger, remain perfectly still, their military training evident in their disciplined patience. Only their eyes move, tracking the approaching cartel members. With laser focus, the lead vehicle's driver, Manuel Ortiz, steps out first, his designer boots crunching on the gravel driveway. His expensive suit seems out of place against the rustic backdrop of the working farm. Miguel recognizes the telltale signs of cartel presence, the overly flashy display of wealth, the false confidence, the subtle bulges of concealed weapons beneath tailored jackets. "Señor Ramirez," Ortiz calls out, his voice carrying an undercurrent of practiced charm that doesn't reach his eyes. "We've come to discuss a business opportunity." Two more men emerge from each SUV, spreading out in a practiced formation that Miguel's trained eye doesn't miss. Their attempt at casual positioning betrays their tactical intent. Miguel's hand rests casually on his wheelchair's armrest, but his fingers discreetly brush against a hidden control panel. Inside the house, his dogs remain motionless, years of rigorous training evident in their perfect stillness. "My farm isn't for sale," Miguel responds evenly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. Ortiz's smile doesn't waver, but his eyes harden slightly. "Everything has a price, amigo, especially in these difficult times." He gestures broadly at the drought-resistant crops Miguel has carefully cultivated. "Times are hard for small farmers. We're offering security, protection." Through the screen door, Miguel hears the nearly imperceptible sound of Shadow's claws adjusting on the hardwood floor. The dog, like his handler, recognizes the veiled threat in Ortiz's words. A warm breeze carries the scent of approaching rain, but Miguel knows the storm gathering on his farm has nothing to do with weather. "I appreciate the offer," Miguel replies, his calm demeanor masking his tactical assessment of the situation, "but my security is well in hand." As if to emphasize his point, Delta lets out a low, almost casual growl from inside the house. The sound carries clearly in the afternoon air. One of Ortiz's men laughs, making a show of looking at the house. "A couple of farm dogs? That's your security?" His hand instinctively moves toward his concealed weapon, but Ortiz shoots him a warning glance. "Not yet." Miguel allows himself a small smile, remembering the thousands of hours of training, the missions across Afghanistan and Iraq, the bonds forged in combat zones between handlers and their K9 partners. These men see farm dogs, he knows. "Better. You should meet my security team properly, Miguel suggests, his finger hovering over the control panel built into his wheelchair. The panel, like much of his equipment, has been modified to accommodate his injuries, a legacy of his last deployment that cost him the use of his legs, but not his spirit. Before Ortiz can respond, a truck appears on the horizon, kicking up dust as it approaches along the farm's long driveway. Miguel recognizes the vehicle. Sarah Martinez, the local veterinarian. Her timing couldn't be worse. Or perhaps he thinks, watching Ortiz's men tense at the approaching vehicle, it couldn't be better. We'll continue this discussion another time, Ortiz says smoothly, though his eyes narrow at the interruption. Consider our offer carefully, Senor Ramirez. The border creates opportunities, but it also brings dangers. Small farms like yours, they can be vulnerable. As the cartel members retreat to their vehicles, Miguel's trained eye catches their subtle hand signals, the way they maintain formation even in withdrawal. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're trained, organized, dangerous. But then again, so are his dogs. Sarah's truck pulls up as the SUVs depart, their tinted windows concealing their occupants but not their intentions. She steps out, her expression concerned as she watches the expensive vehicles disappear in a cloud of dust. Miguel, everything okay here? Just some businessmen, Miguel responds, but Sarah knows him too well. They serve together, she as a military veterinarian, he as a K9 handler. She recognizes the tension in his posture, the way his hand hasn't left the control panel on his wheelchair. Those weren't businessmen, she says quietly, approaching the porch. Through the screen door, Delta whines softly in greeting. Sarah was there when Miguel selected each of his dogs, helped train them, knows exactly what they're capable of. That was the Morales cartel. They've been buying up farms along the border, using them as transit points. Miguel nods, finally releasing the control panel. Inside, his dogs relax marginally, but maintain their positions. They think I'm an easy target, he says, a hint of grim amusement in his voice. A disabled vet with some farm dogs. Sarah kneels to peer through the screen door at Shadow, the oldest of the three dogs. His scars, like Miguel's, tell stories of battles fought far from this quiet Texas farm. Their mistake, she says softly. How many cartel members do you think have faced military K9s? Let's hope they don't have to find out, Miguel responds, but they both know hope has little to do with what's coming. The cartel doesn't make offers they allow to be refused. They'll be back. Inside the house, his dogs maintain their watch, their training visible in every controlled breath, every focused gaze. These aren't ordinary farm dogs protecting livestock. They're elite warriors protecting their handler, their home, their purpose. Sarah opens her medical bag, ostensibly there for the dog's regular checkup. But Miguel notices she also carries a satellite phone. Cell service is unreliable this close to the border. I'm calling Jack, she says, referring to their former commanding officer who now works with Border Patrol. He needs to know the cartel's moving into this area. Miguel wheels himself inside, finally releasing his dogs from their stationed positions. They move smoothly, efficiently, maintaining their defensive positions even as they greet Sarah. Their behavior is subtle but telling. These aren't pets happy to see a friend. They're soldiers acknowledging a trusted ally. They'll be watching. The farm now, Miguel observes, looking out over his land. The cotton fields sway gently in the breeze, looking peaceful despite the tension hanging in the air. They'll try to learn our routines, find weaknesses. Sarah's expression hardens as she examines Delta. her hands moving professionally over the dog's muscled frame. They'll find more than they bargained for. These dogs, they're not just trained for detection and apprehension. They're combat veterans just like you. Miguel wheels to his monitoring station, a bank of screens showing feeds from carefully hidden cameras around the property. Some are obvious, meant to be seen. Others are far more sophisticated, their presence unknown to anyone outside a select group of former military personnel. The cartel thinks they're dealing with a vulnerable farmer, Sarah says, completing her examination of the dogs. They don't realize they're dealing with a fully equipped K9 training facility. How many handlers have you trained here now? 17. Miguel responds, watching his dogs move through their afternoon security patrol with practiced precision. Border patrol, local law enforcement, private security, the farm's just a cover. A good one, but still a cover. The sound of distant thunder rolls across the cotton fields as storm clouds gather on the horizon. But the real storm, Miguel knows, is just beginning. The cartel has made their first move, revealing their interest in his strategic border property. They see a disabled veteran with some farm dogs. They don't know these dogs have more combat experience than most of their soldiers. Sarah's satellite phone connects with Jack's secure line. His voice crackles through with the authority of someone used to handling crisis. Martinez, what's the situation? Morales Cartel just paid Miguel a visit, she reports, watching Miguel track his dogs through the security feeds. They're making moves on border farms. Jack's pause speaks volumes. Ramirez's place? They have no idea what they're walking into, do they? No, Miguel answers, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They don't. As the storm clouds approach, bringing the promise of much-needed rain to the drought-stressed cotton fields, Miguel Ramirez prepares for a different kind of storm. His dogs, elite warriors mistaken for simple farm guardians, continue their patrols with military precision. The cartel thinks they've found an easy target, a disabled veteran running a small farm on valuable border territory. They don't realize this farm houses one of the most sophisticated K9 training facilities in Texas. They don't know these dogs have tracked Taliban fighters through mountain passes, detected IEDs in war zones, and protected their handlers through countless combat missions. They don't understand that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones you underestimate. The first heavy drops of rain begin to fall as Sarah prepares to leave, her examination of the dogs complete. I'll have Jack increase border patrol presence in the area, she says, but they both know the cartel won't be deterred so easily. They've marked this farm as a target, seeing only what they expect to see. Vulnerability where there is strength, weakness where there is deadly capability. Miguel watches the storm approach, his dogs alert and ready beside him. The cartel will return, confident in their assessment of a simple disabled farmer with ordinary guard dogs. And when they do, they'll learn a costly lesson about appearances, about underestimating their opponents, and about the bonds between warriors, human and canine, forged in the fires of combat. The storm breaks over the farm, but Miguel Ramirez remains on his porch, his elite K9 unit at the ready. The real storm is still gathering, and when it breaks, the cartel will discover too late that they've wandered into the territory of wolves disguised as sheepdogs. Night falls over Miguel's farm as Sarah's truck disappears down the long driveway, her taillights swallowed by the stormy darkness. Shadow, the most experienced of his canine unit, positions himself at the front window, his posture alert but relaxed, a sentinel ready for anything but betraying no tension to potential observers. Through the sophisticated surveillance system, Miguel watches the perimeter of his property. 3 black SUVs maintain their distance, parked strategically along different access roads. The cartel is already setting up surveillance, just as he expected. Delta and Ranger patrol the house's interior perimeter, their movements synchronized and precise, following patterns established through years of military service. The satellite phone buzzes, Jack's secured line. Got eyes on 3 vehicles, his former commanding officer reports. They're running plates through the system, but I'll bet my pension they're all stolen or falsified. They're watching the farm, Miguel confirms, adjusting his wheelchair to face the bank of monitors. Standard cartel procedure: establish patterns, identify weaknesses, plan entry points. His voice carries the confidence of someone who has studied his opponents thoroughly. Your cover's still intact, Jack assures him. On paper, you're just a disabled vet running a small farm with some retired military dogs. Your facility's classification is buried under so many layers of security clearance. Even most Border Patrol agents don't know what you really do there. A flash of lightning illuminates the cotton fields, and Miguel catches movement on one of his infrared cameras. 2 figures moving through the crops, using the storm as cover for a closer look at the property. Delta's ears prick forward, picking up sounds too faint for human hearing. They're testing our perimeter, Miguel observes, his tactical mind analyzing their movements. Amateur hour. They're moving against the wind. The dogs picked up their scent 30 seconds ago. As if to confirm his words, Ranger moves silently to the back door, positioning himself for maximum coverage. The satellite phone crackles again, this time with Sarah's voice. Jack, I'm looking at Miguel's medical records, the ones the cartel would find if they dig. Everything's in place. On paper, he's got a severe spinal injury that barely lets him operate the farm. Nothing about his upper body strength, nothing about his continued combat training. Miguel allows himself a grim smile. His wheelchair isn't a prop. His injuries are real enough. But like everything else about his operation, the full truth is carefully hidden beneath layers of misdirection. The cartel sees what they expect to see. A disabled veteran struggling to maintain a small farm with the help of some retired military dogs. They don't see the reinforced doors, the bulletproof windows, the state-of-the-art security system disguised as simple farming equipment. They don't know that every K9 unit graduating from his program undergoes training scenarios in these very fields, learning to operate in conditions identical to cartel territory. Thunder rolls across the property as the 2 figures in the fields retreat. They've seen exactly what Miguel wanted them to see. Standard security cameras, basic fence lines, ordinary farm buildings. The sophisticated motion sensors, infrared detection systems, and hidden defensive positions remain invisible to untrained eyes. They'll make their first real move soon. Jack's voice comes through the secure line. Cartels don't like to waste time once they've identified a target. Usually start with intimidation, property damage, threats, displays of force. Good, Miguel responds, watching his dogs maintain their patrol patterns. Let them come. Every encounter teaches them what we want them to learn. His hands move efficiently over the control panel built into his wheelchair, cycling through camera feeds, checking security zones. Sarah's voice carries concern even through the encrypted connection. Miguel, these aren't ordinary criminals. The Morales cartel has ex-military personnel, professional hitmen. They're not going to be scared off by a few dogs, even if they are retired military K9s. They're not supposed to be scared off, Miguel explains, his tactical experience evident in his calm analysis. They're supposed to underestimate us. Every time they test our defenses, they'll find exactly what they expect. Enough security to protect a small farm, nothing more. They'll grow confident, convinced they found an easy target. That's when they'll make their real move. Through the storm, his infrared cameras pick up more movement. Cartel vehicles repositioning, establishing observation posts. They're professional enough to maintain proper surveillance, but not sophisticated enough to detect that they themselves are being watched far more carefully than they realize. Delta approaches Miguel's wheelchair, pressing against his leg in a specific pattern, a signal developed during their combat tours together. Moments later, Miguel's sensors detect a vehicle approaching from the south access road. "We have company," he informs Jack and Sarah. Single vehicle, moving slow, lights off. The cartel watchers notice too. Miguel sees their vehicle shift, position slightly, preparing to observe this new development. The approaching vehicle stops at his gate, and despite the storm, Miguel recognizes the silhouette. Carlos Mendez, his nearest neighbor. They're watching Carlos make his regular feed. "Delivery," Miguel explains to his companions on the secure line. "Good. Let them see normal farm operations. Let them think they're learning our routines." Carlos, a former Marine himself, knows exactly what Miguel's farm really is. His weekly feed deliveries provide perfect cover for exchanging intelligence, updating security protocols, and maintaining the illusion of normal agricultural operations. To the watching cartel members, it's just another farmer helping a disabled veteran maintain his struggling farm. The dogs maintain their positions as Carlos drives up to the barn. Their disciplined behavior, that of well-trained farm guardians. Not the elite combat veterans they really are. Every aspect of the operation is calibrated to reinforce the cartel's assumptions, to make them see exactly what they expect to see. "Miguel," Carlos calls out, his voice carrying naturally through the rain. "Got your weekly delivery? Need help unloading?" The conversation is casual, practiced, exactly what the cartel observers would expect to hear. "Appreciate it," Miguel responds, wheeling himself toward the barn. His movements are deliberately labored, playing to his audience. The cartel watches a disabled farmer struggling to help with a routine delivery. They don't see the combat veteran, maintaining perfect situational awareness, noting their observation positions, analyzing their tactical deployment. Inside the barn, shielded from surveillance, Carlos's demeanor shifts slightly. "They've got 5 observation posts set up," he reports quietly, pretending to check feed bags. 2 men per vehicle rotated every 6 hours. Professional setup. Miguel nods, appearing to struggle with a feed sack while actually checking his. "Concealed security monitors. They'll maintain surveillance for 3 days, he predicts. Standard cartel protocol. Establish patterns, identify vulnerabilities, plan their approach. On the 4th day, they'll make their first show of force." "Border patrol's ready," Carlos confirms, his casual movements disguising the exchange of information. "Jack's got undercover units standing by but maintaining distance. Everything's set for exactly what you predicted. They'll think they're dealing with local law enforcement response times, not a coordinated military operation." The dogs patrol the barn perimeter, their behavior perfectly matching their cover. As well-trained farm guardians, to the watching cartel members, they're simply protecting their territory. Their military training, their combat experience, their lethal capabilities all remain hidden beneath this carefully crafted facade. Lightning flashes again, and Miguel catches a glimpse of movement in his peripheral cameras, Cartel observers, using the weather as cover to get slightly closer photos of his property. Let them, he thinks, let them see exactly what we want them to see. Sarah's got the vet records all set up, Carlos continues, moving feed bags with practiced efficiency. If they check, they'll find 3 retired military dogs with basic guard training. Nothing about their real service records, nothing about their continued operational status. Miguel's wheelchair hums quietly as he supervises the feed delivery, maintaining the image of a disabled farmer struggling to keep his small operation running. The Cartel observers photograph what appears to be a routine agricultural scene, not realizing they're watching a carefully choreographed performance. They'll hit the southwest corner first, Miguel predicts, having studied Cartel tactical patterns extensively. It's the most obvious approach, seems the most vulnerable. They'll want to test our response, see how the dogs react, gauge local law enforcement response times. Carlos nods, understanding the strategy. Like Miguel, like the dogs, he's a combat veteran playing a role. To the Cartel, he's just a helpful neighbor. They don't know he commands a special operations unit, standing by just beyond their surveillance perimeter. The feed delivery concludes with the same routine efficiency that characterizes everything about Miguel's operation. Every movement, every interaction is calculated to reinforce the Cartel's assumptions, to make them increasingly confident in their assessment of an easy target. As Carlos's truck disappears into the stormy night, Miguel returns to his surveillance center. The Cartel observers maintain their positions, dutifully recording what they believe is valuable intelligence about a vulnerable farm operation. They don't realize that every photograph they take, every note they make, every assumption they confirm is part of an elaborate tactical deception. Shadow, Delta, and Ranger resume their patrol patterns, their movements designed to appear protective, but not overtly military. Like everything else about Miguel's operation, their true capabilities remain hidden beneath a carefully maintained facade of normalcy. The storm continues to rage outside, providing perfect cover for the Cartel's surveillance activities. But the real storm, the one building between Cartel ambition and military precision, is still gathering strength. When it breaks, the Cartel will learn too late that they've walked into a trap of their own assumptions. Miguel watches his monitors, tracking both the Cartel observers and his own concealed security measures. The pieces are in place, the trap is set, and the Cartel is about to learn a costly lesson about underestimating their opponents. They see a disabled farmer with some guard dogs. Soon they'll discover they're dealing with something far more dangerous. A veteran canine handler and his elite team hidden in plain sight. Dawn breaks over Miguel's farm 3 days later, the morning sun illuminating dew-covered cotton fields and casting long shadows across the property. Just as he predicted, the Cartel's surveillance has been methodical, professional, and completely deceived by his operation's carefully crafted appearance. Shadow alerts first, his ears shifting slightly toward the southern access road. Moments later, Miguel's sensors detect 3 vehicles approaching, not the black SUVs from before, but unmarked white work trucks. The Cartel's first show of force disguised as legitimate business, right on schedule. They're moving, Miguel informs Jack through the secured line, his hands moving efficiently over his wheelchair's control panel. 3 vehicles, 8 men. Work truck cover story, probably claiming to be agricultural inspectors or equipment. Maintenance, acknowledged. Jack responds tersely. Border Patrol units are maintaining distance. We're tracking their approach. Carlos has his team standing by. The trucks pull up to Miguel's gate, and he watches through his surveillance system. As men in work uniforms emerge, their cover is professional: clipboards, work boots, high-visibility vests. But Miguel's trained eye catches the subtle signs. The way they move, the bulges of concealed weapons, the practiced formation they take as they approach his house. "Senor Ramirez," the leader calls out, his voice carrying false cheerfulness. "We're here from the Agricultural Department. Routine inspection of border properties." He holds up what appears to be official documentation, but Miguel knows it's as false as their pretense. Through his surveillance feeds, Miguel sees the rest of their team spreading out, using the inspection cover to examine his security measures up close. They're good. Their movements casual enough to fool most observers. But to Miguel's experienced eye, their tactical training is obvious. "Department usually calls ahead," Miguel responds, playing his role perfectly. His dogs bark from inside. The house, not the disciplined silence of their military training, but the normal reaction of farm dogs to strangers. Every detail reinforces the cartel's assumptions. "New policy for border properties," the leader explains smoothly, approaching the porch. "Recent concerns about unauthorized activities. You understand with your military background?" The implied threat is subtle but clear. Miguel allows concern to show on his face, exactly what they'd expect from a disabled veteran facing government inspection. "Let me get my papers," he says, turning his wheelchair toward the house. Inside, his dogs maintain their calculated display of ordinary protective behavior. The inspection team spreads out across his property, their practiced eyes noting camera positions, fence lines, entry points. They're building their tactical assessment, but everything they see has been carefully staged for their benefit. The real security measures remain invisible to their examination. "Your dogs seem well trained," the leader observes, watching Shadow bark protectively from behind the screen door. "Military background showing there too, yes?" His tone is casual, but Miguel detects the probing nature of the question. "Retired. Military dogs," Miguel confirms, maintaining his cover story. "Basic guard training. Not much use otherwise with my condition, but they help protect the livestock." He gestures to his wheelchair, playing to their expectations of disability, limiting his capabilities. The inspection team takes photographs, appearing to document agricultural details while actually mapping his property's vulnerabilities. Miguel watches them identify exactly the approach routes he wants them to see, miss exactly the defensive positions he needs them to overlook. "These cotton fields," another team member comments, consulting his clipboard. "Very resilient despite the drought. Your irrigation system must be quite sophisticated." The question probes at the farm's legitimacy, searching for signs of cartel activities they assume must exist. Miguel wheels himself to the porch railing, maintaining his role. "Got lucky with some drought-resistant strains," he explains. "Local agricultural co-op helped set up the irrigation. Not much sophisticated about it. Just trying to keep the farm running." The leader signals his team subtly. They've seen what they came to see, or rather, Miguel thinks they've seen what he wanted them to see. His dogs maintain their act of standard guard dogs, barking at the strangers, but showing none of their actual military training. "Everything seems in order, Senor Ramirez," the leader concludes, his fake credentials disappearing into his pocket. "Though I should warn you, there have been reports of cartel activity in the area. Small farms like yours, they can be vulnerable." "I appreciate the warning," Miguel responds, letting worry show in his voice. Inside, Shadow and Delta maintain their staged performance, while Ranger monitors the property's blind spots through carefully concealed positions. As the inspection team departs, Miguel tracks their movements through his surveillance system. They're already communicating with their real supervisors, undoubtedly reporting that the farm's security is exactly what they expected. Basic cameras, standard fences, ordinary guard dogs. They'll move within 48 hours, Miguel informs Jack through the secured line. The inspection confirmed what they wanted to believe. They think they've found weaknesses they can exploit. Understood, Jack responds. Border Patrol units are in position, but maintaining distance. Carlos has his team ready. Sarah's standing by with medical support if needed. Miguel watches the white trucks disappear down his access road, knowing they'll maintain observation positions just beyond his apparent surveillance range. They don't realize his actual security perimeter extends far beyond what they've discovered. The dogs resort to their true training as soon as the threat leaves visible range. Shadow takes up his observation post, while Delta and Ranger resume their calculated patrol patterns. Their transformation from barking farm dogs to silent military operators would shock their recent visitors. Sarah's voice comes through the secured line. Medical records are holding up to their investigation. They accessed the VA database an hour ago, found exactly what we wanted them to find. You're officially classified as severely mobility restricted, minimal upper body strength, dependent on assistance for farm operations. Miguel allows himself a grim smile, watching his security feeds. The cartel's inspection team had moved exactly as he predicted, focused their attention exactly where he led them, drawn exactly the conclusions he wanted them to draw. They'll hit at night, he predicts, analyzing their tactical assessment through their movements. Probably tomorrow, small team first, 4 to 6 men. They'll want to pressure me into cooperation rather than risk attention with violence. Through his surveillance system, he watches the cartel's observation vehicles take up their positions just as he'd anticipated. Their confidence is growing, their tactical assessment confirming their assumptions about the vulnerable farm and its disabled owner. Remember, Jack's voice carries the authority of command, we need them to fully commit to the operation. If they suspect a trap too early, they'll retreat and find another target. We need to shut down this entire corridor. Miguel understands completely. His farm isn't just a defensive position, it's bait for a larger operation. The cartel needs to believe fully in their assessment of his vulnerability, commit their resources to what they think is an easy acquisition. The afternoon sun beats down on the cotton fields as Miguel continues his normal routine, maintaining the illusion of a disabled veteran struggling to keep his small farm operational. His dogs play their part perfectly, behaving exactly as expected of well-trained but ordinary guard dogs. Sarah arrives for her regular veterinary visit, her presence part of the carefully crafted pattern of farm life they're presenting to their observers. They accessed your dog's service records, she informs him quietly, while pretending to examine Shadow. Found exactly what we planted. Basic military training, standard guard dog certification, nothing more. Miguel nods, understanding that every piece of their deception is holding perfectly. The cartel's investigation is confirming exactly what they expect to find, making them more confident in their tactical assessment with each passing hour. They'll come through the southwest corner, he predicts, having led them to this conclusion through careful manipulation of visible security measures. It's what they think is our weakest point. They don't realize it's exactly where we want them. Shadow stands perfectly still for his examination, playing his role as a retired military dog while actually maintaining tactical awareness of the entire property. Like his handler, like every aspect of this operation, he presents exactly the image needed to reinforce the cartel's fatal assumptions. The trap is set, the players are in position, and the cartel's confidence grows with each hour of observation. They see exactly what Miguel has carefully crafted: a vulnerable farm, protected by minimal security and some retired military dogs. Tomorrow night, they'll learn the costly difference between appearance and reality. Night settles over Miguel's farm, bringing with it a tense stillness that has nothing to do with the peaceful appearance of the cotton fields under the rising moon. His surveillance system tracks 4 vehicles approaching from different directions, their lights off, their movements suggesting the cartel's first real show of force is about to begin. They're moving, Miguel informs Jack through the secured line, watching the tactical deployment through his sophisticated sensor array. 4 teams, 3 men each, coming in exactly where we predicted. Southwest corner as primary entry point, others as containment teams. Shadow, Delta, and Ranger maintain their positions inside the darkened house, their military training evident in their perfect stillness. No excited barking of guard dogs now. They understand the difference between maintaining cover and preparing. When for combat, border patrol units are in position, Jack confirms quietly. Carlos has his team ready. Remember, we need them to fully commit to the operation. Let them think their intimidation tactics are working. Miguel watches through his infrared cameras as the cartel teams approach his property boundary. Their movements are professional, coordinated. These aren't common criminals, but trained operators. They're good at what they do, which makes their complete misreading of the situation even more satisfying. The first team reaches his fence line exactly where he'd led them to believe security was weakest. Their thermal scans show what appear to be gaps in his surveillance coverage. Gaps that are entirely intentional, channeling them precisely where he wants them. "Senor Ramirez," a voice calls from the darkness, using the direct approach as a distraction for the other teams moving into position. "We need to have another conversation about your property's future." Miguel wheels himself onto his porch, playing his role perfectly. His dogs bark from inside the house, not their disciplined combat reactions, but the expected response of guard dogs to nighttime intruders. Every detail reinforces the cartel's tactical assumptions. "My answer hasn't changed," Miguel responds, letting tension show in his voice. Through his wheelchair's hidden control panel, he tracks the other team's movements. They're deploying exactly as predicted, setting up containment positions that seem sound based on their assessment of his security measures. "The situation has changed," the voice replies as dark figures emerge from the shadows. Miguel recognizes Ortiz, the cartel lieutenant from their first encounter. "You should understand, cooperation is much easier than conflict." The cartel teams have fully entered his outer security perimeter now, moving with the confidence of professionals who believe they've properly assessed their target's capabilities. They see exactly what they expect: a disabled veteran with some guard dogs, minimal security, and no real defense against their show of force. "You're trespassing," Miguel states firmly, maintaining his cover of brave but ultimately vulnerable resistance. Inside, his dogs have gone quiet, a detail the cartel teams might have found suspicious if they weren't so confident in their assessment of simple guard dogs. Ortiz approaches the porch, his manner shifting from false charm to open threat. "You're Dogs can't protect you, Senor Ramirez. We've dealt with military dogs before. A few pieces of meat with sleeping pills, and your security becomes very peaceful. Miguel allows himself to show fear, playing to their expectations. Through his hidden systems, he monitors the cartel teams taking up their final positions. Everything is proceeding exactly according to plan, their confidence growing with each step into his carefully crafted trap. Last chance for the easy way, Ortiz announces, signaling his men to approach the house. After tonight, things become much more difficult. The threat in his voice is no longer subtle, but Miguel detects the underlying confidence of someone who believes they've already won. The cartel teams begin their coordinated approach to the house, their movements suggesting they expect resistance. From standard security measures and aggressive guard dogs, they're prepared for exactly the level of defense they believe a disabled veteran's farm would have. That's when Miguel triggers his first surprise. Hidden lights suddenly illuminate the property, not from obvious security positions, but from carefully concealed locations that leave the cartel teams exposed while maintaining shadows that hide his defensive preparations. Their night vision equipment, calibrated for darkness, momentarily blinds them. Interesting choice of timing. Miguel's voice carries clearly through the night air, all pretense of vulnerability gone. 4 teams, 12 men, standard cartel intimidation protocol, except you made some assumptions about this farm's security that aren't quite accurate. Shadow, Delta, and Ranger emerge from concealed positions, not from the house where the cartel teams were watching, but from strategic points around the property. Their movement is silent, disciplined, displaying none of the unfocused aggression of guard dogs and all the lethal precision of combat-trained military K9s. You should have checked their service records more carefully, Miguel continues, his wheelchair humming quietly as he maintains his position. These aren't retired military dogs with basic guard training. They're active special operations K9s. With more combat experience than your entire team, the cartel operators realize their mistake too late. The dogs move with coordinated precision, herding the intruders into predetermined containment areas. These aren't animals that can be distracted by drugged meat. They're elite military assets executing a practiced tactical response. Your surveillance was good, Miguel acknowledges, as Border Patrol units emerge from concealed positions, their own K9 teams moving to secure the perimeter. But you saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Every camera you spotted, every security measure you mapped, every vulnerability you identified was part of the plan. Ortiz's face transforms from confidence to dawning comprehension as he realizes the true nature of the trap they've walked into. This isn't just a farm, he manages, watching his teams being systematically contained by the coordinated action of human and canine operators. No, Miguel agrees, his wheelchair's hidden panels now displaying tactical information previously concealed. This is one of the most sophisticated canine training facilities in the country. Those gaps in security coverage you identified, they were designed to channel you exactly where we wanted you. Carlos emerges from the darkness with his special operations team, their movements coordinated with the K9 units to establish complete tactical control of the situation. The cartel's been looking for a vulnerability in border security, he comments. Congratulations, you found exactly what we wanted you to find. The operation concludes with textbook precision. The cartel teams, despite their training and experience, find themselves completely outmaneuvered by the combination of military, K9s and special operations personnel. Their careful tactical assessment of a vulnerable farm's security has led them directly into a precisely planned trap. Your background investigation was thorough, Miguel tells Ortiz, as Border Patrol units secure the scene. But you found exactly the information we planted. My injury is real enough, but assuming it made me vulnerable was your first mistake. Assuming these were just guard dogs was your last. Sarah arrives with her medical team, their presence part of the operation's careful planning. "You know what I find interesting?" she asks Ortiz as she checks Miguel's dogs for any signs of stress from the operation. "You were so focused on assessing the farm's security, you never questioned why a disabled veteran with some retired military dogs needed a specialized veterinarian making regular visits." Jack coordinates with Border Patrol units as they process the captured cartel members. "This property has been under surveillance for months," he informs them. "Every move you made, every bit of intelligence you gathered was part of a coordinated operation to shut down your entire border corridor." The night air carries the sound of additional units moving in to secure the expanded perimeter. Miguel's farm, appearing vulnerable and isolated, was actually the center of a sophisticated law enforcement operation. The cartel's careful tactical assessment, their professional surveillance, their confidence in their intelligence had led them to exactly the wrong conclusions. "Your dogs," Ortiz says finally, watching Shadow Delta and Ranger maintain their disciplined combat positions. "They're not just military trained, are they? They're still active duty. Special Operations K9 unit," Miguel confirms, his wheelchair now clearly displaying its tactical modifications. "This farm isn't their retirement home, it's their training facility. Every behavior you observed, every pattern you documented was part of their cover. The cotton fields that had seemed so vulnerable now reveal their tactical significance. Training grounds designed to replicate various combat scenarios. The farm buildings that appeared to have minimal security now display their true nature. As sophisticated training facilities, the cartel will learn from this," Ortiz warns as he's led away. "They'll adapt, find other routes, other vulnerable points. We're counting on it," Miguel responds, watching his dogs maintain their security positions with professional precision. "Every route you find, every vulnerability you identify will lead you exactly where we want you to go. That's the thing about assumptions. They're excellent tools for those who know how to use them." The night settles into the routine of law enforcement processing as Miguel's farm reveals its true nature. Not a vulnerable target for cartel exploitation, but a sophisticated trap that used their own tactical procedures and assumptions against them. His dogs, their military training no longer concealed, continue their practiced patrol patterns, ready for the next operation, the next group of observers who will see exactly what they're meant to see. Dawn breaks over Miguel's farm the next morning, the rising sun illuminating a drastically changed landscape. Where cartel surveillance vehicles once maintained their observation posts, Border Patrol units now secure an expanded perimeter. The cotton fields that served as cover for approaching cartel teams have become processing areas for evidence collection. 12. And cartel operators in custody. Jack reports through the secured line, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a well-executed operation. Plus, we've identified their entire surveillance network. The Morales cartel's border corridor is effectively shut down. Miguel watches through his surveillance system as federal agents document the sophisticated security measures that had remained hidden from cartel observation. Shadow, Delta, and Ranger have resumed their actual training routines. Their military precision no longer concealed behind the facade of ordinary guard dogs. They're already talking, Sarah adds, arriving for a genuine medical check of the K9 unit after the operation. Ortiz is particularly cooperative. Apparently, discovering your farm's true nature has convinced him that his organization's intelligence capabilities aren't what he thought they were. Through his tactical displays, now operating openly, Miguel monitors the expanding impact of their operation. Other cartel surveillance teams are being rounded up across the border region. Their carefully planned observation posts compromised by the intelligence gathered from last night's captured teams. Your cover's still intact for other operations, Carlos confirms, reviewing security footage of the encounter. They think this was a specialized sting. No one's connected it to the other training facilities yet. His special operations team maintains perimeter security while federal agents process the scene. Miguel wheels himself to his monitoring station, no longer hiding his chair's sophisticated tactical modifications. They'll adapt, he predicts, analyzing data from multiple border sectors. Cartels always do, but now they'll be second-guessing every assessment, questioning every seemingly vulnerable target. Sarah examines Shadow, her practiced hands checking for any signs of stress from the operation. That's the real victory, she observes. Not just shutting down this corridor, but making them doubt their own intelligence gathering. Every disabled veteran, every small farmer, every seemingly easy target becomes a potential trap. The morning brings a parade of federal officials, each wanting to understand how a seemingly vulnerable farm became the centerpiece of such a sophisticated operation. Miguel watches them examine his security systems, study his K9 training facilities, and gradually comprehend the extent of their achievement. Walk me through it again, a senior DEA agent requests, still processing the operation's complexity. You basically turned their own tactical procedures against them? They follow standard protocols, Miguel explains, his dogs demonstrating their actual capabilities nearby. Surveillance, assessment, escalation. We just had to understand their playbook better than they did. Every security camera they spotted was placed to be spotted. Every vulnerability they identified was designed to be identified. Carlos adds his perspective, his special operations background evident in his analysis. They're good at what they do, he acknowledges. Professional, methodical, thorough, but that thoroughness became a weakness. They were so confident in their tactical assessment that they never questioned why everything fit their expectations so perfectly. The farm's hidden training facilities are now fully operational, no longer concealing their sophisticated nature. Through the barn's open doors, the DEA agent watches veteran handlers working with new K9 units, preparing them for similar operations along other border sections. Your dogs, the agent observes, watching Shadow coordinate with Delta on a complex training exercise. Even their behavior during the operation was calculated. The barking, the apparent aggression, everything, Miguel confirms. Military K9s don't waste energy on unfocused aggression, but that's what they expected to see. Retired military dogs acting like typical guard dogs. So that's what we showed them. Every reaction, every pattern was choreographed to reinforce their assumptions. Sarah's medical examination of the K9 unit reveals exactly what she expects. Peak condition operators maintaining perfect tactical discipline. Even their veterinary records were part of the deception, she explains to the assembled officials. Standard checkups, basic health maintenance, exactly what you'd expect for retired military dogs, nothing suggesting their actual operational status. Jack arrives with more updates from the expanding operation. Cartel's pulling back from 3 other sectors, he reports, spreading tactical maps across Miguel's monitoring station. They're scared. Suddenly, every vulnerable target looks like a potential trap. Every disabled veteran with security cameras might be running a sophisticated sting. The morning sun climbs higher as federal agents continue processing evidence from the operation. Miguel's farm gradually reveals its true nature. Not just a K9 training facility disguised as agricultural operation, but a sophisticated model for future border security operations. This changes the game, the DEA agent realizes, watching the coordinated activity of human and K9 operators across the property. Not just here, but across the entire border. You've made them doubt their own tactical assessment capabilities. That's the real purpose of this facility, Miguel explains, his wheelchair moving smoothly between monitoring stations. Not just training K9 units, but developing new approaches to border security, understanding cartel tactics and using their own procedures against them. Carlos's team begins breaking down their tactical positions, their movements revealing how completely the property had been secured without the cartel's knowledge. Every apparent vulnerability, he explains, was actually a strength. Every gap in security they identified was designed to channel them exactly where we wanted them. Sarah continues her examination of the K9 unit, but her practiced hands now check for peak performance rather than maintaining the illusion of retired military dogs. The psychological impact is significant, she observes. They're trained to look for patterns, to trust their tactical assessment. Now every pattern they identify might be deliberately crafted to deceive them. Through his surveillance system, Miguel monitors the expanding impact of their operation. Cartel observation posts across the region are being abandoned as their operators realize the extent of their vulnerability. Every seemingly easy target now represents a potential threat to their operations. Your injury, the DEA agent asks finally, watching Miguel operate his sophisticated tactical systems. That's real enough, but they assumed it meant vulnerability. Best cover is based in truth, Miguel responds, his hands moving efficiently over his wheelchair's control panels. The injury is real, took an IED in Afghanistan, but assuming it limited my capabilities was their mistake. Same with the dogs, they're actually military K9s, just not retired ones. The farm's training facilities continue their operations, now openly displaying the sophisticated nature of their program. New handlers work with their K9 partners, learning the subtle art of deception that had proved so effective against cartel observation. We'll need to expand the program, Jack announces, reviewing tactical data from multiple border sectors. Other cartels will learn from this, adapt their procedures. We need more facilities, more training operations. Miguel nods, watching Shadow guide a new K9 unit through complex tactical exercises. They'll be more cautious now, he predicts. Every surveillance operation, every tactical assessment will come with doubt, that hesitation, that uncertainty. It's more valuable than any number of arrests. The morning progresses as federal agencies coordinate their responses to the operation's success. Miguel's farm becomes a model for a new approach to border security, one that uses the cartel's own tactical procedures and assumptions against them. The real victory, Carlos observes, watching the coordinated activity across the property, isn't just shutting down their corridor. It's making them question every corridor, doubt every assessment, second-guess every seemingly vulnerable target. Sarah completes her examination of the K9 unit, now documenting their actual capabilities rather than maintaining their cover. These dogs, she tells the assembled officials, represent the future of border security, not just their combat capabilities, but their ability to maintain complex tactical deceptions. Through his sophisticated monitoring systems, Miguel tracks the operation's expanding impact. Cartel surveillance teams across the region are withdrawing, their confidence shattered by the revelation of their complete tactical misread of his farm's capabilities. They'll adapt, he acknowledges, watching the evidence collection continue across his property. Find new routes, develop new procedures, try to rebuild their intelligence capabilities. But now they know every disabled veteran might be an operator, every guard dog might be a combat-trained K9, every vulnerable farm might be a sophisticated trap. The morning sun illuminates the cotton fields that had served as their tactical staging ground, now revealing the carefully planned training areas concealed within their apparent agricultural purpose. Miguel's farm stands as testament to a new kind of border security, one that turns the cartel's own tactical expertise against them. Jack coordinates with multiple agencies, expanding the impact of their successful operation. This becomes the model, he declares, watching new K9 teams train across the property, not just for border security, but for a completely new approach to cartel interdiction. Making them doubt their own capabilities is more effective than trying to match them tactically. The farm's true nature now operates in plain sight, its sophisticated training facilities no longer concealed behind the facade of agricultural operation. But its real victory lies not in what it reveals, but in what it represents. A fundamental change in how cartels must approach their border operations, never again certain whether their tactical assessments can be trusted. 2 weeks after the successful operation, Miguel's farm has transformed from a covert tactical deception into something even more significant, a blueprint for a new approach to border security. The morning sun finds him reviewing surveillance data from 3 new facilities, each modeled after his operation's success. Cartels completely shifted their tactics, Jack reports through the secured line, his voice carrying both satisfaction and concern. They're avoiding any target that looks too vulnerable, too perfect. Problem is, now they're getting desperate, taking bigger risks with harder targets. Shadow and Delta patrol the expanded training grounds, where new K9 units learn the subtle art of tactical deception. Ranger works with a group of fresh handlers, teaching them how to make highly trained military dogs appear as simple farm guardians. That's why we need to adapt faster than they do, Miguel responds, his wheelchair moving smoothly between sophisticated monitoring stations. Every time they change tactics, we need to be 3 steps ahead. Through his surveillance system, he watches cartel movements across multiple border sectors, studying their evolving patterns. Sarah arrives with unexpected news, her expression mixing concern with strategic opportunity. Remember those 3 farms the cartel was pressuring before? They hit your place. They're reaching out. Seems your operation's success has given them ideas about fighting back. The implications unfold across Miguel's tactical displays. 3 more potential staging grounds, 3 more opportunities to turn the cartel's own procedures against them, but also 3 more chances for something to go wrong, for the deception to fail. They're not all veterans, Carlos cautions, reviewing data on the potential new operations. Regular farmers, families who've worked that land for generations. They don't have our training, our experience. No, Miguel agrees, watching his dogs demonstrate the perfect balance of apparent aggression and hidden discipline. But they have something just as valuable: authenticity. The cartel expects civilians to behave differently than military. We can use that. Jack's tactical assessment appears on Miguel's screens, showing cartel movements adapting to their new reality. They're consolidating operations, focusing on fewer routes but hitting them harder. More resources, more manpower, bigger shipments. They're gambling that we can't cover everything. Through the barn's open doors, Miguel watches new handlers, learning the complexities of tactical deception. It's not enough to train the dogs for combat. They have to master the art of appearing untrained, of hiding their capabilities behind carefully crafted behaviors. We've got another problem, Sarah adds, reviewing intelligence reports. Cartels bringing in outside experts, former military contractors, specialized security consultants. They're trying to learn how to spot our deceptions. Miguel wheels himself to the primary tactical display, his chair's modifications now fully visible in the openly operational facility. Good, he declares, surprising his team. Let them learn. Every expert they bring in, every new procedure they develop, gives us more to work with. Carlos understands immediately. They're looking for patterns, he realizes, trying to develop profiles for identifying our operations. But in doing that, they're creating patterns of their own. Miguel finishes. More predictable, more exploitable patterns. Shadow, demonstration scenario 3. The lead dog moves with perfect precision, showing a new group of handlers how to make military training appear as undisciplined aggression. Delta and Ranger coordinate seamlessly. Their movements a masterclass in tactical deception. The 3 farms, Miguel decides, reviewing their locations on his tactical displays. We don't turn them into copies of this operation. That's what they're looking for now. Instead, we create something new, something that uses their new caution against them. Sarah catches his strategy first. The farmer's lack of military experience. That's not a weakness, it's an asset. The cartel's looking for hidden operators now, suspicious of any target that seems too perfect. So we give them exactly what they expect to find, Carlos continues, understanding the approach. Real civilians, actual vulnerable points, legitimate security concerns. Everything their new experts tell them to look for. Jack's voice carries approval through the secured line. And when they convince themselves they've finally found genuine soft targets, they walk into legitimate law enforcement operations. Miguel confirms, no tactical deception required, because their own paranoia becomes the deception. Shadow, Delta, adjust pattern 7. The dogs demonstrate a new sequence, showing how their apparent behavior can be modified to match various tactical scenarios. Their capabilities aren't just about combat effectiveness now. They're teaching a whole new generation of K9 units how to hide in plain sight. We'll need to coordinate with local law enforcement, Carlos points out, already planning the expanded operation. Make everything look exactly like what their experts expect. Standard police response times, normal patrol patterns. Sarah reviews the farmers' profiles on Miguel's tactical displays. Their properties are perfect for it, she observes. Real agricultural operations, actual security concerns, genuine vulnerabilities. Everything the cartel's new procedures tell them to look for. Through his surveillance system, Miguel monitors cartel movements adjusting to their new reality. Their caution, their hesitation, their desperate search for patterns they can trust. It's all becoming part of a larger tactical picture. They've changed the game, he tells his team, watching Shadow guide new K9 units through complex training scenarios. Now we change it again, not by hiding our strength, but by making them see strength where there is none, and vulnerability where there is strength. The morning progresses as they plan the expanded operation. Miguel's farm continues its transformation from a single tactical deception into something more significant, a training ground for a completely new approach to border security. The cartel's bringing in experts, Jack updates them, sharing new intelligence, former military, private security consultants, counterintelligence specialists. They're developing protocols to identify operations like yours. Perfect, Miguel responds, his tactical displays showing multiple potential scenarios. Let them create their protocols. Every checklist they develop, every pattern they identify, becomes another tool we can use against them. Through the sophisticated monitoring systems, they watch cartel operations evolving across the border region. Their movements are more cautious now, their tactical assessments more thorough. But in their very caution lies opportunity. The 3 farms, Carlos suggests, studying their locations. We let the cartel surveillance spot actual vulnerabilities, real security gaps, genuine weaknesses, everything their new experts tell them to look for. Sarah understands the strategy, and when their thorough tactical assessment confirms exactly what they expect to find, they walk into legitimate law enforcement operations. Miguel finishes. No deception required because they've deceived themselves. Shadow Delta Demonstration Sequence 4. The dogs move through complex training scenarios, teaching new K9 units the subtle art of tactical presence. Their military training now serves a dual purpose. Not just combat effectiveness, but the ability to appear less capable than they are. The farm's expanded training facilities buzz with activity as handlers learn the principles that made Miguel's operation so successful. But the lessons have evolved. It's no longer just about hiding capabilities, but about understanding how. The cartel's own procedures can be turned against them. They're creating their own vulnerability, Jack observes, watching the operation take shape. Their new caution, their expanded tactical assessment, their reliance on expert analysis, it all makes them more predictable. Miguel's tactical displays show the broader strategic picture emerging. The cartel's adaptation to their successful operation isn't just changing their procedures, it's changing how they think, how they assess threats, how they make decisions. That's the real victory, he tells his team, watching Shadow coordinate complex training exercises. Not just making them doubt their tactical assessment, but making that doubt work for us. Every time they second-guess a target, every time they look for hidden strength, we gain another advantage. The morning sun climbs higher as they refine their expanded strategy. The 3 farms that once represented vulnerable targets now become opportunities to exploit the cartel's own caution. Their very effort to avoid deception becomes part of a larger deception. Through his sophisticated surveillance systems, Miguel watches the border security landscape transforming. What began as a single operation, a disabled veteran using cartel assumptions against them, has evolved into something far more significant, a fundamental change in how cartels must approach their entire border operation. The dogs continue their demonstrations, teaching new handlers the complex interplay between capability and appearance. In their precisely controlled movements lies the future of border security. Not just the ability to fight, but the sophisticated tactical understanding of when not to fight. 1 month into the expanded operation, the transformed landscape of border security takes shape across 3 neighboring farms. Miguel's surveillance systems track cartel experts, conducting exactly the kind of thorough tactical assessment he'd anticipated. Their careful analysis finding precisely what they expect to discover. They're being even more methodical than we predicted, Jack reports through the secured line. Their security consultants have spent 2 weeks documenting normal patterns, verifying response times, confirming vulnerabilities. Everything looks exactly like legitimate civilian operations. Miguel watches through his sophisticated monitoring network as cartel observers maintain their distance, carefully documenting what appears to be standard agricultural activity. Shadow and Delta work with the new farm owners, teaching them how to make genuine security concerns appear more prominent without seeming artificial. That's the beauty of it, Sarah observes, reviewing surveillance footage. We don't have to fake vulnerabilities. Real farmers have real security gaps. We just help them understand how to let those natural patterns work for us. The morning briefing brings updates from all 3 locations. Carlos's team has integrated seamlessly with local law enforcement, creating response patterns that perfectly match what the cartel's experts expect to see. Rodriguez's farm has them particularly interested, Carlos reports, indicating the property closest to Miguel's operation. They've documented his irregular patrol schedule, noted how his security cameras leave gaps in coverage. Everything their new protocols tell them to look for in a legitimate target. Through his tactical displays, Miguel tracks the cartel's evolving assessment. Their experts are thorough, professional, documenting every detail that confirms their assumption of finding genuine vulnerable points after weeks of encountering sophisticated traps. They're starting to push harder, Jack adds, sharing new intelligence, testing responses, probing defenses, but carefully, methodically. Their experts have convinced them they've finally found actual soft targets. Ranger works with a group of local law enforcement K9 units, teaching them how to maintain normal patrol patterns while preparing for coordinated response. The dog's behavior is perfect, professional but not military, trained but not tactical. The hardest part, Sarah notes, watching the training, is helping civilian operations maintain authentic patterns. Military precision would give away the game. We need genuine randomness, real inconsistencies. Miguel's wheelchair moves smoothly between monitoring stations, his tactical modifications now serving to coordinate multiple operations rather than maintain a single deception. That's why we chose these 3 farms, he explains. Real families, actual agricultural operations. Everything about them is authentically civilian. Through the barn's open doors, new K9 units train alongside regular police dogs, learning the subtle differences in behavior that will maintain the operation's credibility. The cartel's experts are watching for military precision, tactical coordination. They find instead the natural patterns of civilian security, Rodriguez reported another drive-by last night. Carlos updates them, showing surveillance footage. 3 vehicles, standard cartel observation pattern. They're building confidence in their assessment. Miguel's tactical displays show the broader operation taking shape. The cartel's experts, so careful to avoid another sophisticated trap, are walking directly into a different kind of deception. One based not on hiding strength, but on allowing genuine patterns to work in their favor. Their paranoia is working for us, Jack observes through the secured line. Every vulnerability they identify is real. Every security gap they find actually exists. Their experts are doing perfect analysis of exactly the wrong thing. Sarah reviews medical reports from the civilian K9 units now integrated into the operation. Even the dogs are perfect, she notes. Regular police K9s, standard training, nothing to trigger their experts' suspicions about military capabilities. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, they watch the cartel's tactical assessment progressing exactly as planned. Their experts document real patrol patterns, actual response times, genuine security measures. Everything confirms their belief that they've finally found legitimate targets. Martinez's farm has them particularly convinced, Carlos reports, indicating the second property. His security equipment is older, his camera coverage incomplete, all the signs their new protocols tell them to look for. Miguel studies the tactical displays, watching the cartel's confidence grow with each confirmed vulnerability. They'll move soon, he predicts. Their experts have verified everything. Every checkmark on their new procedures confirms these are legitimate civilian operations. Shadow and Delta demonstrate for new handlers how to maintain proper police K9 protocols without revealing tactical capabilities. Their behavior is precisely calibrated, professional enough to be credible, but without the military precision that would trigger expert suspicion. The third farm is the key, Jack adds, sharing updated intelligence. Thompson's property. They've documented his irregular maintenance schedule, noted his inconsistent security patterns. Everything looks exactly like what they expect from a civilian operation under financial pressure. Through his surveillance network, Miguel monitors all 3 properties as the operation enters its critical phase. The cartel's experts have spent weeks verifying, documenting, confirming. Their thorough analysis has convinced them they've found genuine opportunities. Local law enforcement is ready, Carlos confirms, reviewing response protocols. Regular patrol patterns, standard response times. Everything matches what their surveillance has documented. Sarah works with civilian K9 units, ensuring their behavior maintains perfect consistency with normal police operations. Even their training schedules are authentic, she notes. Regular department rotations, standard certification procedures. Miguel's tactical displays show the cartel's observation posts maintaining their careful distance. Their experts conducting final verification of vulnerability patterns. They're almost ready, he analyzes. One more week of confirmation, then they'll begin testing responses. Through the barn's open doors, regular police K9 units train alongside Miguel's dogs, learning how to coordinate responses without revealing tactical capabilities. The differences in their behavior are subtle but crucial. Professional competence. Without military precision, Rodriguez reported unusual traffic patterns this morning. Jack updates them. They're starting to probe response times, test patrol schedules. Their experts are making final confirmations before authorizing action. The morning sun climbs higher as they monitor the operation's progression. What began as a single farm's sophisticated deception has evolved into something more subtle, using genuine civilian patterns to create a different kind of tactical advantage. The beauty of it, Carlos observes watching surveillance footage, is that everything their experts document is absolutely real. Every vulnerability they identify actually exists. We're not hiding capabilities. We're letting normal patterns work for us. Through his sophisticated monitoring systems, Miguel tracks the cartel's evolving confidence. Their experts, so careful to avoid another military deception, are playing directly into a more sophisticated trap. One based not on creating false patterns, but on using real ones. They'll hit all 3 farms simultaneously, he predicts, studying tactical displays. Their experts have convinced them these are legitimate soft targets. They'll want to secure the entire corridor before anyone can respond. Shadow and Delta work with local K9 units, teaching them how to maintain normal police protocols while preparing for coordinated response. Their behavior sets the standard. Professional capability without revealing tactical training. Martinez's property will be their primary target, Jack adds, sharing intelligence analysis. Thompson's farm for containment, Rodriguez's as fallback. Everything their experts have documented tells them this is the optimal approach. Miguel's wheelchair moves smoothly between monitoring stations, coordinating the final phases of their expanded operation. The cartel's careful tactical assessment, their expert analysis, their thorough documentation, it's all leading them exactly where they need to go. The real deception, he tells his team, watching the operation unfold across multiple displays, isn't in what we're hiding. It's in letting them find exactly what they're looking for. Every vulnerability they identify, every pattern they document, confirms what they want to believe. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch the cartel's final preparations taking shape. Their experts have spent weeks confirming, verifying, documenting. Their analysis is perfect, professional, and completely misguided. They're creating their own trap, Sarah observes, watching civilian K9 units maintain perfect consistency with normal police operations. Their caution, their expertise, their thorough tactical assessment, it's all making them more predictable. The night of the cartel's coordinated strike arrives exactly as Miguel predicted. His surveillance system tracks multiple vehicles approaching all 3 farms, their movements displaying the confidence of operators certain in their tactical assessment. They're moving, Jack confirms through the secured line. 3 teams per farm, heavily armed. Their experts have convinced them these are soft targets. They're expecting minimal resistance. Through sophisticated monitoring networks, Miguel watches the operation unfold. The cartel teams maintain perfect tactical spacing, their movements showing the thorough training of professionals who believe they've finally found legitimate vulnerabilities to exploit. Rodriguez reports first contact. Carlos updates, tracking movement at the nearest farm. 4 men, standard intimidation approach. Everything matching their established protocols for civilian targets. Sarah coordinates with local K9 units positioned across all 3 properties. The dogs maintain exactly the behavior patterns the cartel's experts have documented. Professional but not tactical. Trained but not military. Martinez's property is their primary focus, Miguel observes, watching tactical displays show concentrated movement. Just as we anticipated, they're committing most of their resources there, expecting typical civilian response patterns. Shadow and Delta maintain their positions at Miguel's facility, ready to coordinate with police K9 units when the operation moves into its final phase. Their behavior now shows their full tactical capability, no longer needing to hide their military training. Thompson's reporting vehicle movement on his southern access road, Jack adds, through the secured line. They're following exactly the approach route their experts identified as lowest risk. The cartel teams begin their coordinated advance, their confidence evident in their precise movements. Weeks of surveillance have convinced them they're dealing with ordinary agricultural operations, vulnerable civilian targets. All units in position, Carlos confirms, monitoring law enforcement deployment. Standard patrol patterns maintained, regular response times verified. Everything appears exactly as their surveillance documented. Through his sophisticated monitoring system, Miguel watches the cartel operation reach its crucial phase. Their teams move with professional precision, executing the carefully planned approach their experts spent weeks developing. First team, breaching Rodriguez's perimeter, Sarah reports, tracking K9 unit positions. Police dogs responding exactly as documented, standard containment patterns, normal threat response. Miguel's tactical displays show the operation unfolding across all three properties. The cartel teams maintain perfect formation, their movements showing complete confidence in their expert assessment of vulnerable civilian targets. Martinez's security cameras picking up multiple breaches, Jack updates them. They're following their planned routes perfectly. Every gap their experts identified, every weakness they documented. Through the barn's surveillance feeds, Miguel watches police K9 units moving into predetermined positions. Their behavior maintains perfect consistency with normal law enforcement protocols. Nothing to trigger the cartel's tactical suspicions. Thompson's reporting final approach, Carlos adds, monitoring the third property. Three teams moving exactly as their experts predicted. They're completely convinced these are legitimate civilian operations. The night air carries the sound of distant vehicles as the cartel teams begin their main thrust. Their coordination is perfect, their timing precise. Everything their weeks of careful surveillance told them would be necessary to overcome normal civilian security. All units acknowledge initiation. Miguel commands through secured channels. The response is immediate but measured. Law enforcement teams moving with deliberate restraint, maintaining the appearance of standard police reaction times. Shadow and Delta react to his signals, their military training now fully evident as they coordinate with police K9 units across all three properties. The cartel teams, so careful to avoid another tactical deception, have walked directly into a different kind of trap. First team entering Martinez's main structure, Jack reports, tracking movement through infrared sensors. They're maintaining perfect tactical spacing, exactly what their experts recommended for civilian resistance. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, Miguel watches the operation reach its critical moment. The cartel teams, convinced by weeks of expert analysis that they've found legitimate vulnerable targets, are committing fully to their assault. Rodriguez's security systems registering multiple breaches, Sarah updates them. Police K9 units responding with standard containment protocols, everything matching documented patterns. Miguel's wheelchair moves smoothly between tactical displays, coordinating the multi-property response. The cartel's careful planning, their expert assessment, their thorough documentation, it's all leading them exactly where they need to be. Thompson's Perimeter fully compromised, Carlos reports, monitoring the third location. They're following their primary infiltration route, the one their experts identified as optimal for civilian targets. Through secured channels, Miguel gives the final signal. Across all three properties, law enforcement units begin their coordinated response, but not with military precision or tactical sophistication. Instead, they maintain the exact response patterns the cartel's surveillance has documented. First team reaching Martinez's central position. Jack updates them. They're completely committed now. Their expert's assessment has convinced them these are legitimate civilian operations. Shadow and Delta move with precise military coordination, now serving as command units for the distributed police K9 teams. Their behavior no longer needs to hide their tactical training. The cartel's own expertise has created the perfect deception. Rodriguez's teams entering final approach, Sarah reports, tracking K9 unit deployment. They're maintaining perfect tactical formation, exactly as their experts advised for civilian resistance. Through his sophisticated monitoring network, Miguel watches the operation reach its conclusion. The cartel teams, so careful to avoid another military deception, have walked perfectly into a trap of their own making. All units in final position, Carlos confirms, coordinating law enforcement response. Standard containment protocols maintained, everything appearing exactly as their surveillance documented. The night air carries the sound of coordinated movement as law enforcement teams begin their final approach. The cartel operators, convinced by their experts' thorough assessment, maintain perfect tactical positioning for engaging civilian targets. Martinez's team fully committed, Jack reports through secured channels. They've reached their primary objective, exactly where their experts told them they'd find vulnerable civilian operations. Through tactical displays, Miguel watches the operation's ultimate phase unfold. The cartel teams, their movements showing complete confidence in their expert analysis, have positioned themselves perfectly for coordinated apprehension. Thompson's security system showing full penetration, Sarah updates them. Police K9 units maintaining standard response patterns, nothing to trigger tactical suspicion. Miguel's sophisticated monitoring systems track the final moments of a cartel movement. Their teams, so carefully positioned according to expert assessment of civilian vulnerabilities, have walked directly into prepared containment zones. All units acknowledge execution, he commands through secured channels. The response is immediate but measured. Law enforcement teams moving with deliberate coordination that maintains appearances of standard police action. Shadow and Delta coordinate with police K9 units across all three properties, their military training now serving to guide rather than hide. The cartel teams, their own expertise having convinced them of their tactical advantage, have no way to counter their own assumptions. First team secured at Martinez's location, Jack confirms, tracking multiple apprehensions. They maintained perfect tactical positioning right until the end, exactly as their experts advised. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, Miguel watches the operation conclude across all three properties. The cartel teams, their movements showing the precision of professional operators convinced of their tactical superiority, are systematically contained and apprehended. Rodriguez's teams fully secured, Sarah reports, monitoring K9 unit activity. Their expert assessment of civilian vulnerabilities led them exactly where we needed them to be. Miguel's tactical displays show the operation's complete success. The cartel's careful planning, their thorough expert analysis, their professional tactical assessment, all of it served to create the perfect trap, one based not on deception, but on their own expertise. Thompson's location, reporting full containment, Carlos confirms, coordinating final law enforcement action. Every team followed their experts' recommendations perfectly, right into prepared containment zones. Through secured channels, Miguel receives confirmation of total operation success. Across all 3 properties, cartel teams that believed they were exploiting documented civilian vulnerabilities have instead fallen victim to their own careful tactical assessment. Final count confirms all targets secured. Jack reports, his voice carrying satisfaction, even through encrypted communication. Their experts gave them exactly what they wanted to hear. Perfect analysis of exactly the wrong thing. Dawn breaks over the 3 farms as federal agents process the largest coordinated cartel apprehension in the sector's history. Miguel's surveillance systems track the systematic documentation of how thoroughly the cartel's own expertise contributed to their downfall. 36 operators in custody, Jack reports through the secured line. Plus their entire tactical assessment team. We've effectively dismantled their border operations for this entire region. Through sophisticated monitoring networks, Miguel watches the operation's aftermath unfold across all 3 properties. The cartel's captured experts, their professional pride shattered, begin to understand how completely their thorough analysis led their teams into perfectly prepared containment zones. They still don't fully grasp what happened, Sarah observes, reviewing debriefing reports. Their tactical assessment was perfect. Every vulnerability they identified was real. Every weakness they documented actually existed. They just didn't understand how those very patterns could be used against them. Carlos coordinates with law enforcement teams, processing evidence across all 3 farms. The beauty of it, he explains to federal agents, is that everything they documented was genuine. Real civilian operations, actual security gaps, legitimate response patterns. Their own expertise convinced them they'd finally found true vulnerable targets. That's what makes this model so effective, Miguel adds, his wheelchair moving smoothly between monitoring stations. We didn't have to create false patterns or hide sophisticated capabilities. We just had to understand how their own tactical procedures would lead them exactly where we wanted them to go. Shadow and Delta work with police K9 units, now openly demonstrating the coordination between military and civilian capabilities that made the operation possible. Their behavior represents the future of border security, not just tactical effectiveness, but strategic understanding of how to use enemy expertise against them. Their surveillance was incredible, Jack notes, sharing captured intelligence. 12 weeks of documentation, thorough analysis of every pattern, complete verification of all security measures. They did exactly what their training told them to do. Through the barn's open doors, Miguel watches federal agents processing captured cartel teams. Their expressions show the dawning realization that their own professional competence, their careful tactical assessment, their thorough expert analysis all serve to create the perfect trap. Martinez's property proves the concept completely, Sarah reports, reviewing operational data. They documented real patrol patterns, actual response times, genuine security gaps, everything their experts told them to look for in a legitimate civilian target. Miguel's tactical displays show the broader implications of their success. The cartel's adaptation to his initial operation, their recruitment of expert consultants, their development of sophisticated assessment protocols, all of it made them more predictable, more vulnerable to their own assumptions. Rodriguez's teams followed their playbook perfectly, Carlos adds, monitoring final evidence collection. Every approach route, every breach point, every tactical position was exactly where their experts told them they should be. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watched the impact of their operation ripple through cartel organizations across the border region. The capture of their tactical assessment teams, the compromise of their expert protocols, the revelation of how their own expertise betrayed them, it all contributes to a fundamental shift in cartel operations. Thompson's property sealed it, Jack confirms through secured channels. They were so convinced they'd found legitimate vulnerabilities, they committed fully to the operation. Their experts had confirmed everything they wanted to believe. Shadow and Delta coordinate with law enforcement K9 units, demonstrating the new approach to border security that made their success possible. The integration of military precision and civilian patterns creates a model that turns enemy tactical assessment into a strategic advantage. The psychological impact is significant, Sarah notes, reviewing interrogation reports. Their entire tactical assessment process is compromised. Every expert analysis, every vulnerability identification, every pattern recognition now comes with doubt. Miguel's surveillance network tracks cartel movements across multiple sectors, showing their immediate operational changes in response to the coordinated arrests. Their careful tactical procedures, their reliance on expert assessment, their thorough documentation, it's all become a liability. This changes everything, Carlos observes, watching federal agents process captured intelligence. Not just their border operations, but their entire tactical approach. They can no longer trust their own expertise to identify legitimate targets. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, they track the broader strategic implications of their success. The cartel's adaptation to their initial deception led them to develop more sophisticated assessment procedures, which in turn made them more vulnerable to a different kind of trap. Their experts are the key, Jack adds, sharing analysis of captured documents. Every protocol they developed, every pattern they identified, every vulnerability they confirmed, it all served to convince them they'd finally found genuine civilian targets. Shadow and Delta work with new K9 units, teaching them the principles that made their operation successful. The integration of military and civilian capabilities creates a model for border security that uses enemy tactical expertise as a strategic asset. Martinez's teams provided perfect confirmation, Sarah reports, reviewing operational data. Their expert assessment identified every real vulnerability, documented every actual security gap, verified every genuine response pattern. They saw exactly what they needed to see. Miguel's tactical displays show the operation's impact, spreading across cartel organizations. Their careful procedures, their professional assessment, their expert analysis, all of it now serves to make them more cautious, more hesitant, more vulnerable to their own expertise. Rodriguez's property demonstrates the model perfectly, Carlos notes, coordinating final evidence collection. Every tactical position they took, every approach route they used, every breach point they selected was based on expert confirmation of legitimate civilian patterns. Through secured channels, they receive updates on cartel responses across the border region. Their operations are freezing, their tactical teams hesitating, their expert consultants second-guessing every assessment. The impact of turning their own expertise against them creates rippling effects through their entire organization. Thompson's teams fell for it completely, Jack confirms, sharing intelligence analysis. Their experts had convinced them they'd finally found vulnerable civilian targets after weeks of encountering sophisticated traps. Their own caution led them directly into containment. Shadow and Delta demonstrate for federal observers how military canine units can integrate with civilian law enforcement operations. Their behavior shows the future of border security, not just tactical effectiveness, but strategic understanding of how enemy expertise can become a vulnerability. The real victory, Miguel tells his team, watching the operation's aftermath unfold across multiple displays, isn't just in the arrests or the seized assets. It's in how thoroughly we've compromised their tactical assessment capabilities. Every expert analysis now comes with doubt. Every vulnerability identification carries uncertainty. Every pattern recognition questions itself. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, they track the immediate impact of their success. Cartel operations across multiple sectors show hesitation, uncertainty, a fundamental loss of confidence in their own tactical procedures. Their expertise, once a strength, has become a strategic weakness. This becomes the model, Jack declares, through secured channels, watching federal agents process captured intelligence. Not just for border security, but for a completely new approach to cartel. Interdiction, making them doubt their own capabilities, question their own expertise, second-guess their own assessment. The morning sun climbs higher as they begin planning their next phase of operations. The success across all three farms proves their concept. Enemy tactical expertise, properly understood, becomes a tool for creating more sophisticated traps. The future of border security lies not in matching cartel capabilities, but in turning those very capabilities into vulnerabilities. As the sun sets on Miguel's farm, the impact of their revolutionary operation continues to ripple through the border region. The cartel's carefully crafted tactical procedures, their expert consultants, and their sophisticated analysis, all transform from strengths into vulnerabilities by one disabled veteran and his elite K9 unit. Shadow, Delta, and Ranger patrol the property's perimeter, their military precision now openly displayed. Their story has become a blueprint for a new approach to border security, where enemy expertise becomes a strategic advantage and apparent vulnerability conceals genuine strength. You know what really changed? Miguel asks Sarah as they watch. New K9 teams training in the fading light. Not just how we fight cartels, but how they have to fight us. Every time they think they've found an easy target now, they have to wonder, is it real or is it another trap? Through his surveillance systems, he monitors the transformed border landscape. Cartel operations have fundamentally shifted, their confidence shattered by the revelation that their own tactical expertise led them into perfectly prepared containment zones. Sometimes, he tells his team, watching Shadow guide new handlers. Through training exercises, the best weapon isn't what you hide, but what you let them find. Sometimes victory comes not from matching their strength, but from making that very strength work against them. The flag snaps in the evening breeze as stars emerge above the cotton fields. Inside the barn that once concealed its true purpose, A new generation of handlers learns the art of turning enemy expertise into vulnerability. And across the border region, cartel operators approach every seemingly easy target with new uncertainty, never sure whether their careful tactical assessment is leading them into another trap. If this story touched your heart and you want to hear more incredible tales of courage, determination, and innovative thinking, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we bring you amazing true stories that remind us of the extraordinary things ordinary people can achieve when they think differently about strength and vulnerability. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. I've got something special coming tomorrow that will absolutely amaze you. Remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't what you hide, but what you let others think they've found. Thank you for being part of our community. Together, we're sharing stories that show how intelligence, determination, and creative thinking can overcome any challenge. See you in our next video.